Welcome, audience, and welcome everybody watching this recording. I'm here today interviewing and discussing entrepreneurship and leadership with Ashish from Hyperion Robotics. You are the CTO and co-founder. Am I not?
Yes.
That is correct. A proper introduction. Would you like to say a few words yourself?
Hi, Nikki. Thank you for having me. So my name is Ashish. I'm not going to introduce myself from Hyperion Robotics side because that is already done. My background is in architecture. I'm actually an architect, so architect who actually designs buildings. And then I moved to world of art for a few years, and then from there I moved to world of academia for a few years, so almost a decade. And then from academia, I decided to move on entrepreneurship. And Hyperion Robotics is actually my second attempt at a startup in Finland.
Okay.
And let's see how it goes.
Okay, we hope it goes well. I mean, uh, for being a startup in the construction industry, we'll go into that topic. There's probably a lot of learning, but since this is your second rodeo, so to speak, what's a entrepreneurial lesson you've had to learn the hard way?
The entrepreneurial lesson which I had to learn the hard way was, I think it is not a secret, but the team and the vision. So the team has to share the vision, right? So that is
Mm,
something which is very important, and the team also needs to have the same amount of passion as you have. And
mm,
if the vision is different and if the levels are also different, then that just doesn't work. This is something which I had to learn the hard way.
okay.
Nobody tells you that, they always tell you that, okay, you need to have this, you need to have different expertise,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
need to be expert in this field and that field, and you need to have all co-ownership of the company. But nobody tells you that you need to also have the same amount of passion, which is very important to be an
Mm.
entrepreneur. If you're not passionate about what you do, then you're in the wrong game.
Okay, so would you say you need to have the same amount of passion about the problem being solved, or same amount of passion to be like doing an entrepreneurial endeavor?
No, the problem to be solved. So same amount of
Mm,
passion, that problem which is in hand in front of you, and
mm,
then you also get the same amount of dedication. Then like if there is passion, then you
mm,
will learn things which you don't know before, which is true in my case. I had to learn so many new things which I had no idea before,
mm.
and I did it, and I still do it because I'm passionate about what I do. If I was not passionate, then I would just be with my expertise which I had before joining this
Mm.
journey, and then wouldn't move forward.
Yeah,
So
of
that
course.
is that is something which I think I have learned specifically.
Yeah, I could relate to like having a reason to get out of bed, and then everybody around you having that same energy level to tackle things regardless of the challenges you face, right?
Exactly, it's very
Mm.
important.
And you mentioned you've been in Finland for quite a while. So another topic I wanted to discuss with you was what's like the learnings from being a foreigner, or like starting a company, learnings from starting a company away from your country of origin, if you will. Or I don't know if you call Finland home yet, or is home still back in India. But like, what is it like starting a company in a foreign country, so to say?
Yeah, well, it's a very precarious situation. It's just a very different situation. I have been here for 10 years. I have
Mm.
been outside India now since 2007. So there is no home for people like me. Basically, we cannot call anything home.
Okay.
It's everything is always in flux. Like after not being living in India for a long time, you're not an Indian anymore, so to speak. But living in another country, you will never be of that country in any ways. So we
Okay.
are this kind of people who don't feel home, and
Mm.
that's also another reason of what we do is try to create home with knowing that there will be never that the place which you're living in, specifically in my case,
Mm.
home. And starting of new company in Finland, honestly, it was very easy. I feel that Finland has this kind of ecosystem, which I always am very surprised and also advertise a lot. is it's very easy. You don't need to be somebody from the country to start a company. You can start a company very easily. There is a lot of support system everywhere. Like I was in Aalto University, so of course there was startup sauna, there was QS, there were so many coaches, so many people who you could talk to, so many different companies you can spar with. One part which is difficult, which is difficult also for people who are not from the who are from the country to understand is we are also on a very short time span here, right? Specifically now with this new government rule, it's like if you do not have a job, you need to leave in 3 months, right? So for us, the risk is even higher because there is no safety net, right? You start a company, if it's not successful, then you're just out of the country. So not only your company fails, not only the endeavor which you start which fails, but you're no longer welcome in the country, and then you need to go somewhere else then now to start again from zero. So that is added risk of being a foreigner in any country to start a company, I think.
Have you have you heard somebody say that I won't start because of this, or who have like had like this happen to them, right?
Yeah,
So
I know people who had this happen to them. So there was a case which was also there in Helsinki Sanomat this last 6 months. I know this person personally. He had started the company failed, and then now he doesn't get the visa. Now he has to leave. So this has happened. But I think not necessarily this becomes an hindrance in any case. But of course, starting your own company is already a step up, right? So you already
yeah,
are taking a risk, and now you have to do double risk of like, okay, if it fails, then you're also out of the country. If you're from Finland, if you're from EU, you don't have this problem, like if the company fails, the country is not going to kick you out, so to
yeah,
speak.
okay,
But in our case, we will be kicked out. So we have a second level of difficulties, or we don't have this kind of safety net which exists
yeah,
for other
yeah. So
people.
there's an added layer of fear
Exactly.
that you can, and then combine with you say like I want to grab on the creating home like wherever you are because nobody will do that for you. So like what are the things you do to create home for yourself?
Well, to create home for myself is the ecosystem, right? So ecosystem of your friends, ecosystem of the activities which you like to do, things which you could do, but still, like you're always in the bubble. And then this is something which is also to do with you, right? So me, for specifically, I learn Finnish, but not enough that I can be part of like many conversations with Finnish people, right?
Yeah, okay.
And then that what's also makes me always feel like imposter syndrome, so to speak. Like that I'm an imposter to be part of this community, and I'm actually not part of this community. And then you create your own bubble, which in the end it's like it's your own tribe, right? Your own tribe. So our tribe is the entrepreneurs tribe. So we are in this tribe, and this is our
Yeah.
bubble. And then you go out of this bubble, and then you meet people who are very different. So this creates again like this kind of sense of home, right?
Yeah.
Your community,
The
your
people.
bubble, and the people who surround you, and people you
And where have
surround.
you found these? Like, how did you go about it? Did you wait? Like, I doubt you waited for the community to come to you. Like, I
No,
think,
I'm very extrovert.
yeah.
So that's another advantage which I have. Not many people are extrovert; they are very introvert, and then it becomes very difficult for them. So
Mm,
I'm very extrovert. If I just go to a room, I will just start chatting up with people, talking to them, asking things to them, and start creating like connections, and
mm.
making new friends.
And and where have you? So you mentioned you went through Kiowas, right, with
Yeah,
Hyperion
twice. So I went
twice.
with Q. So the QoS was with Hyperion, and then with my previous company, we did Summer of Startup in 2016. So I have done Summer of Startup in 2016, and then QoS now in 2020.
Yeah, the summer of startups no longer exists, right? But
Yeah, yeah.
it was an accelerator program.
It was an accelerator program which used to happen in summer, in the old startup sauna building, and then the idea was a little bit different. Most of the companies were very young, fresh, just the ideas were
Mhm.
there, and then you just start. I think none of the companies from our time exist anymore from the summer of startup, like from the batch.
Yeah.
But it was a really good learning experience. It was very intensive. Also, we were there all the time, 2 months. All the teams were in sitting in
Yeah.
startup sauna the whole time. So that intensity actually helped.
Hmm. So alongside this intensity, what are the like? Would you? What are the reasons you would go again, or tell somebody to be a part of such a program that is like that or similar?
Well, it's information on steroids, right? So you first of all have, let's say, 10, 12 different companies, and then
Mm,
multiply that by two or three amount of people who are into
mm,
the similar journey of entrepreneurship, starting at the similar point in life. Then
mm,
you have like 10, 20, 30 different coaches, or you're
mm,
talking to different people who have experience starting companies or experience
mm,
in funding companies, and you get so much information which otherwise would take you like years to gather that information. Or
mm,
so your network becomes so large so fast that
mm,
again, like, to create that kind of network will take years. Like, we have, as
mm.
Hyperion, I think we've done 6 or 7 different accelerator programs. So our network is quite huge, and then it also helped us to learn many things,
Mm.
because many startup programs are very fixated on certain topics, right? So when we did Summer of Startup, it was really, what I felt was really all about pitching. It's about pitching, pitching, pitching. You train for
Mm.
pitching. Then we did QS, and it was all about talking to customers, right? So different
Mm.
accelerator programs focus on different aspects, and
Yeah.
it was important to do those different programs, because then we could actually learn from all those different aspects and like
Yeah.
enrich ourselves.
And what about networking then? Like, how have you gone about like networking in these accelerators? Like, do you keep a log of everybody you meet? Like, do you send them emails every time you meet them? Like, what has been your tricks of like retaining the knowledge and who's who? You know?
Well, in many cases, I still talk to them like randomly. Again, we meet in many events. Sometimes we have similar questions or similar topics. So there was one company in Norway. We became friends with them in the accelerator, Catapult Accelerator,
Mm.
and we were in, both of us were in construction business. So we still keep in touch, understand each other's
Mm.
businesses. What are the problems? What are the issues? And then some of the times, it also becomes friendship, right? So it's not
Mm.
about business anymore. You just talk about other things. You talk about your hobbies, of similar hobbies which you do together.
Yeah.
So that is also different. So of course you don't keep in touch with everyone, but
Mm.
you create this kind of smaller bubbles within those circles, and you like talk to them and you work with them, and sometimes you
Mm.
you might be working with them in the future, right? Because you know
Yeah,
that
of
this
course.
person is really good in this. So if I
Mm.
want to do a business, or if I'm working in this field and if I need this person, then I know where to get that person and who is
Mm.
that person.
Yeah, fair enough. Going into the construction business, which you are in, and talking about what Hyperion does, I thought instead of kind of preparing market research at large,
Mhm.
I'm using here something called Perplexity, which is a search engine, and I asked them. So this is using AI to find info online, right?
Mhm.
And bridging into the construction, you said you became friends with somebody in Norway, and kind of they are within the industry. So it says here that the market size is 687.2 billion currently. That's a big number. Is that a number you've used in your pitches?
I think the number might be even bigger, but construction industry is huge. That everybody knows.
Yeah. And it's growing, but not as much as most of them. And then the global concrete materials market is a bit smaller, but is doubling in size more or less. I don't know why the KKR here the next 6 years. Um, so when you want to place yourself in this industry or Hyperion, where are you? Are you in the construction? Are you in the material? For the audience to get a sense of where you're at.
Yeah, so Hyperion is not necessarily a materials company, right? So we of course have this kind of low carbon, and we are working on the carbon negative materials. So we have
Mm,
materials, but we don't sell those raw materials to customers. So then that makes
mm,
us not a material company. But what we do right now is we use those materials and in an optimized way by using 3D printing, and we
mm,
create structures or elements. So we would be like more or less into this precast concrete market, but the
mm.
precast concrete market, which is specifically in infrastructure. So we only work in infrastructure.
Yeah.
But like these numbers might be very, very wrong, because just an example I will give you. So we are in energy
Mm,
market, right? So energy market in Germany.
mm.
So Germany is going to build 100 billion euros worth of infrastructure for
Okay.
energy in next
Mm.
10 years. 100 billion, just one country. Germany is a big market, but in a global sense it's a very
Yeah,
small
yeah.
market, right? So it's a huge thing, like 100 billion worth of infrastructure which we will be built just for our energy transition, because we need more electricity because of EVs, we need more
Yes.
electricity because of data centers, we need
Yeah.
more electricity because of AI data centers. So we need
Mm.
to we need to build our energy infrastructure 30% more every year, right?
Yeah.
That means more energy plants, but also means more energy cables. That means more big pylons, and that means more
Mm.
foundations, which we make for these foundations, for these energy pylons. So the market is huge. I think there's just the infrastructure market is more than in Europe itself is more than 100 billion. So construction is $1 trillion industry,
So
and
there's kind of where you're at place, because the next question I asked Perplexity here was how many new companies are created within the industry at an annual rate, right? Because a very like for mature industries that you're in, you always have like a relatively low like entry rate or new, right? So you've been around some time, but you're also in a established market. So how many like new players do you see coming in trying to do what you're trying to do?
yeah, so construction is a age-old industry, as everybody knows. We have been building
Mm.
forever because we need to live in something which protects us.
Yeah.
But then construction is also the least automated industry in the world, right? So
Mm.
every industry in the world in last 50 years or 100 years since industrialization has become automated and has become less dependent on labor. But what has
Mm.
happened to construction is construction has remained the same for last 100 years, and not a lot of innovation and lot of automation has happened.
Mm.
So this is something which is changing right now because the labor costs are going up very, very high.
Mm.
Many people do not want to work in construction because it's blue collar work.
Yeah.
So all the skilled laborers which are in the construction sector are actually retiring, and then as not as many new people are joining the industry.
Mm.
So the industry actually needs to address this. First of all, a skilled labor shortage. Plus, we are building more than ever. So we are
Mm.
building more than what we used to build. So that means we need actually more people or more resources to actually
Mm.
build that. And of course, there is this whole push towards more greener construction,
Mm.
because concrete, the material which we work with, is the second most used material on our planet after water. So we use more concrete than anything else, other than water. And concrete also uses water, so
Mm.
it's a huge usage.
Mm.
So what we are trying to do is to use that material in a very optimal way, and to
Mm.
also reduce the carbon of that material. So then we emit less CO2, because more we build, more CO2 we are going to emit. This is just going to
Yeah.
be the case. So what we need to do is, like, first of all, build less,
Mm.
build efficiently, and whatever we
Mm.
build, build that using less carbon intensive materials.
Mm. So could your like you said, you're not in the materials business. You are a company currently trying to print the concrete and make pieces that are useful in the construction industry. So
Yes.
before going into like what your product is, like let's talk a bit about the material. Could you use like there's a big boom in creating carbon captured material. You might be familiar with Pebble, for example. They recently raised around trying to capture carbon and creating a product out of that captured carbon that is like concrete. So like
Hmm.
what sort of like materials could you use? Is it always concrete or could you like actually substitute?
Yeah, so we can substitute different materials. We can use greener materials, which we have been using actually.
Mm,
Uh, but we need to see what are the benefits, right? So
mm,
what I'm gonna say next is gonna be controversial. So let's say, so if you use technology from companies which do carbon capture, like Carbon Cure or Pebble,
yeah.
what happens is that of course you can reduce your carbon footprint of whatever you use by 5 to 10%, 15%, and that's
Okay.
all, right? That's the amount of reduction which you will get in CO2. What we
Okay.
do actually, we can actually reduce the CO2 by 50%, which is like 3 times more. So we can
Mm,
actually, what we create, the structures in the end uses less CO2 than if those structures were built by materials which were provided by Pebble or Carbon Cure.
mm,
And this is the message which I think is getting lost in whatever we are telling,
mm.
because we are actually even less carbon than all the carbon capture companies in the end.
And like, could you like please educate me on like why is that? Is it because you just use so much less material when constructing a piece?
Yeah, yeah. So I will give an example. So like like now you're making a cube, right? So we work with a
Mm,
company where they make a foundation which is a cube, and that
mm,
foundation uses 4 tons of material, right? For simplicity, we say that 4 tons of material, each 1 ton is 100 kilograms of CO2, right?
mm,
So that now that with the traditional material, that cube to make that cube is
mm,
400 kilograms of CO2 is generated. Let's say now you use any kind of carbon capture technology, which
mm.
reduces the carbon footprint by, let's say, on a bigger number, 20%,
Okay.
right? So 400 by let 25% make it easier. So it's reduced by 25%. So now if you use a carbon capture material, so the same cube will be made by using 300 kilograms of CO2 instead of
Mm,
400 of the traditional. We, because we do 3D printing and we do optimized shape, we
mm,
use 1 ton of material, first of all, instead of 4 tons. So the
mm.
CO2 is already reduced from 400 kilograms to 100 kilograms. So our CO2 is
Yes.
already 100 kilograms, starting with where carbon capture companies CO2 has still 300 kilograms. So we are already 3 times less CO2. Then we have also carbon materials which are less carbon intensive.
Mm,
And if we use those less carbon intensive, we can actually bring that CO2 even to 10 kilograms or 15 kilograms. So we are starting from 400. And let's say
mm.
if we reach 40, we can actually reduce the CO2 by 10x by both combination of the
That's
technology and the material.
mm, understood. Yeah,
Same
I
we can do,
visited.
like, so we can also use like carbon cures material, right? So we can use, let's say we use carbon cures material for our 3D printing
Mm,
process. So then let's say our CO2 is at 100 kilograms now, and we use now carbon cures technology, 20% less. So now
mm.
our CO2 is 80 kilograms, right? Instead of
Yeah,
400. So yeah, there is also, we can use those materials and reduce CO2 further, but we already are even lower than that.
yeah, no, understood. So, is there something I could actually, since I've visited your factory recently, you weren't able to host me at the time, but I was there. I took you. You will have, and you can probably share some better pictures when we release this episode. But I took one here, for example, where you can see the pieces, right? So here in the middle, you have something that is shaped like an X, which is what I understand one of these foundation models. So it's not a block cube. It's
Exactly.
yeah. So what is then that goes into this? So if I assume there's I haven't done the engineering studies to understand this, but if you use a different material, the durability, how does that affect combined with the shape, right? So do you need to like are there is concrete better for shapes that are like this, and then some other material would be better for some other shape?
Yeah, so companies which are working in the field, which are making like concrete-like material,
Mm,
which are geopolymers or this kind of carbon capture material. So they all those materials can be shaped into this shape, right? But
mm,
if you have to do that in traditional way, then you have to make a mold, and that mold
mm,
making process, which is either by wood or something like that, takes much more amount of time. So what we are doing here is that we are actually 3D printing the mold itself at the same time, which this foundation I think took roughly around 10 minutes to print. So
Okay.
the mold making process is like super quick, right? And the mold itself then becomes a part of the structure, and then you pour the concrete in it, and then it becomes like a real structure in the end.
So
So
how are that the like how are the traditional players in this industry? How are they doing this? Like
so
I
they
assume
either make a cube, they either make a cube, or they make like a smaller cube and a bigger cube on bottom. So these are kind of like pad foundations. So there is a bigger cube on the bottom, and then a smaller cube on top. So this is something which the prefab industry does in Finland quite well right now. So if you see all this new infrastructure getting built in Finland, it's made by prefab technology. So these kind of molds which are in the factory where they pour the material, and it's also very very optimized as opposed to just making a huge block of concrete.
okay, fair
And
enough.
here you can also, of course, in both our case and their case, you can use this new carbon capture materials to reduce the CO2 footprint, of course, further.
Fair enough. So the solution really sounds like it's doing something useful for the world. What are the biggest business challenges for you? Like, for example, acquiring customers. Like, what are the blockers you have for adopting this? Like, for your clients to adopt you at scale?
Well, construction is a very age-old industry, which I think every new company who is making new materials or new technology is facing similar challenges, because everybody who works in the industry is used to do it in a particular way. Uh, Pouring concrete on site is dirt cheap. It's dirt cheap, like super cheap. It's 1 ton of this concrete just costs 150 euros per ton, right? And if your new carbon capture material costs like 50% more or even 100% more, nobody's going to adopt it if it costs double the amount.
Yeah, of course.
So whatever solution which you are providing in the end has to be price competitive. It cannot be price premium. This is at least our understanding, that it cannot be price premium to compete. So this is what our challenge right now is. Our challenge is, first of all, to be price competitive, and then the second one, trust. So trust is something which is difficult to build in construction industry, because we talk to people who are like, we are doing this now like this way for last 50 years. We know it works. We know it's going to stand for 50 years. We don't know what we are doing is going to stand for 50 years. How do you prove it? Can you prove it? And then we say like, but we are using same type of material. It's just that the recipe is different, and it's the way the material is added is different. It's just 3D printed instead of like poured into a mold.
Mold.
Basically,
Yeah.
our mold is like we are building the mold and then we are pouring it in. So it's the same material, very exactly the same material which is already Eurocode compliant. We are building structures which are Eurocode compliant. So everything is code compliant. But because it's a new method and it's a new thing which people are not used to, there's this kind of fear of like that not working the same as what I have been doing for hundreds of years before.
Okay. Fair
So
enough.
that fear we have to get out of, and which we are. We have delivered now 6 projects this year. So that trust building is happening slowly, slowly. And then, those smaller projects will become into bigger projects, and then bigger
Yeah,
projects will
you can
become
show.
into much larger projects. So there will be trust. We can say like, hey, we have our structures are in this site here in Finland. Our structures are here in this sites in the UK. They have
Yeah.
been there. They're not pilots, they're actual real structures. So this is something which we have to build over time.
Fair enough. Building trust, the hardest thing in any business.
Exactly, and specifically in construction industry, which is very very conservative, because they have to be, right? Because everything which you build, you need to trust that that's going to last hundreds of years. You need to
Of
trust
course.
that if a storm comes, nothing is going to fall down and nothing is going to harm anybody or any infrastructure
Yeah.
or any human or anybody. So you need to be damn sure that it works, right? A piece of technology, like if this stops working, it's not going to directly
And
harm.
lives are not at stake the same way
Exactly,
as, yeah.
exactly. The lives are not at stake, so the scrutiny is at much higher level.
Yeah, no, that's understandable. So people usually like to round off. This has been lovely talking to you, Ashish. I've learned learned a lot, especially about the concrete industry. And I hope more companies like you find ways to just reduce consumption as opposed to just finding smarter ways to go about carbon. You usually ask like, what is the advice you would give like a younger version of yourself? But instead of asking that question, is like, is there something you'd hope the older version of you wouldn't forget? Like when you're 20 years older, hopefully still around, and your company is some success, like what would you hope at that point you wouldn't have forgotten?
Well, I would go back to the whole passion and drive and learning. So I
Mm,
think I hope I never stop learning until I die,
mm,
and I never lose my passion and drive,
mm,
because otherwise, that is what keeps me going. Like learning new
mm,
things. I want to learn about everything which is happening new.
mm,
Like whatever, like you need to like keep on getting knowledge, and you get knowledge from
mm,
all weird stuff. Yesterday, for example, MacBook Pro was launched, and I saw the video of the MacBook Pro launch, and there was one of the example is a concrete 3D printing company from US which is
really?
using a MacBook Pro. So, and then they're showing like, hey, you're doing computer. Like, wow, that's such a marketing one. It's like
Well, I
you
need to
your
check. I need to
company,
check that out.
your company is in a MacBook Pro ad. What else do you want? Everybody in the world is gonna see it now that this is a concrete 3D printing company using MacBook Pro.
Amazing. Well, that's so cool. Well, thank you, Ashish, for the discussion. And if people want to reach out to you, help, or kind of learn more about Hyperion, how would they do that?
I think they can just ping me on LinkedIn, add me on LinkedIn. As I was telling, I didn't say that before. I also did some coaching in QAS,
Mm,
so I like to help. I like to share my experiences, and like like if there is something which I have learned before, and if I can pass
mm.
that on to people, I'm happy to do that.
Amazing. So on LinkedIn, Ashish Mohita, is that how you pronounce the surname?
Yes, Ashish Mohita. Yes, exactly.
Mohita. Amazing. Thank you for your time, and thank you, audience, for listening. We'll end the recording here.